Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me for another Outer Limits review. Today, I will be talking about Season 1, Episode 14, The Zanti Misfits, directed by Leonard Horn, and starring Michael Tolan, Olive Deering, Robert F. Simon, and Bruce Dern. And seems like Zanti Misfits is considered one of the more classic Outer Limits episodes, and I can understand why. This episode was really, really good. I would probably even say great. There's a lot of memorable moments in it. I would say that the episode takes a little while to get going, but once it does, it never stops. It's pretty much nonstop action, and I highly recommend this episode. So we start with a professor and a major, and they're in a ghost town. Turns out they're waiting for a group of aliens from another planet called Zanti to arrive. It turns out that there's some men monitoring these events, including a general who we also meet, who's very important to the plot, and they're waiting for the Zanti to arrive. So at this point, we get to know our professor, whose name is Stephen, and the general a bit more. They talk, and they have some concern about the Zanti's motives, especially the professor, who seems skeptical of what's going on here. It turns out the Zanti are sending their exiled criminals. Basically to this deserted town or somewhere near it because they don't believe in executing their criminals. So the general and the others are waiting for this to happen. So we get a little bit more information and on the situation in the area. It was okay, a little bit of exposition, but nothing terrible. Then we get a message from the Zanti, basically laying out the terms for us, the audience. It turns out that they say they need their privacy, and if any humans invade the designated area where they're supposed to stay, there will be trouble, and they will immediately, take care of anyone who's in their way. So, of course, right when this happens, the next scene in the episode, we see a car smash through the restricted area. I thought this was put together pretty well, and we turn out that this is two people, Ben and Lisa, and their car is broken down. So now they're basically stuck somewhere out in the desert in the restricted area, and the Zanti are landing. So we can tell this is going to cause a lot of problems. We do learn a little bit more about Ben and Lisa. It turns out Lisa's running away from her husband. We don't really totally know why, but there will be more characterization for her later on in the episode. Ben has also had his troubles, it appears. It seems like he's taken some money or something and he's been in trouble before. But basically, one slight complaint is Ben is really more of a plot device than anything else. But it was handled fine. At least he's an interesting plot device. So at this point, Lisa considers going home, but Ben tells her he can't because he'll be in trouble for some reason. At the same time, the general is monitoring the situation. He finds out that someone's in the restricted zone, but he only has limited information. And he's trying to make contact with this Zanti to tell them that this is all a mistake and not start a war. So at this point, Ben is exploring, not sure if he's looking for help or what he's doing, but he comes across the Zanti ship, and at this point we finally get to see a Zanti, and I have to say the creature design is very, very interesting. They look kind of like insects, but with heads. It's kind of dated, of course, because this is 1960s TV, but the effects really worked for me. I feel like the Zanti themselves are very memorable, and I had no issue with the effects at all, really. So at this point, Ben keeps exploring. The Zanti attack him, when he goes up to their ship, and basically he's a goner at this point, leaving Lisa on her own. I was actually pretty surprised that Ben left the episode so quickly. This genuinely shocked me a little bit. So at this point, the general and Professor Stephen and all the men are very concerned about the situation. The professor suggests sending in one person, like a mediator, maybe to smooth over the situation, and he volunteers himself. The general agrees at this point. So Lisa's looking around, walking for Ben at this point, freaking out a little bit, which is understandable. She actually does find him, and he's a goner, and this is a pretty disturbing scene. Some really good cinematography in this part of the episode as well, in my opinion. Some interesting shots. She also sees the Zanti for the first time and runs off. She's not too happy about this. So Lisa's chased. She gets back to the car in a pretty intense chase scene. I gotta say, it was pretty creepy for 1960s TV. So this chase continues for a while. She gets back out of the car for some reason. Might have been safer in the car, but the Zanti are really freaking her out. At the same time, of course, Professor Stephen is going out to this area, and this part was kind of predictable, but it was very effective. Basically, the general tells Stephen to come back because it's too dangerous, but of course, Stephen finds and rescues Lisa, but he also has to kill one of the Zanti to save her, and this makes the Zanti very unhappy, as we'll find out soon. So at this point, Lisa also breaks down crying. She's upset. She definitely has some personal issues to work through, which, to her credit, she does blame herself. For all these things. I thought this scene worked really well, and I thought Olive Deering did a really good job of portraying this character without going over the top. I thought her acting was really solid here, and I did feel a little bit for her character, so good job there. So things are starting to come to a climax. Like I said, the Zanti aren't happy. They decide to land their ship right on top of the military outpost, and the Zanti do attack, literally. There's quite a few of them, so now it's basically the men at the military base fighting against the Zanti. And this is an actual battle, an all-out war, pretty much. This is a pretty impressive scene for 1960s TV. I was shocked we actually got to see a full battle scene here. It's pretty intense and pretty well done. I have to give director Leonard Horn some credit here as well. I thought it was pretty convincing and actually pretty exciting in some ways. Very impressive scene, probably the highlight of the episode. But then, of course, the men prevail in the end after a tough fight with the Zanti. And we get a message from the other Zanti saying that this was their plan all along. They knew that humans would probably destroy the Zanti criminals for them because they weren't capable of execution. So we get an action-packed episode that also has a pretty solid and thought-provoking message to it. So overall, I thought the Zanti Misfits was a very satisfying episode. Like I said, it started a bit slow, and the character of Ben was a little bit of a plot device. But these are minor complaints in what I do think is an essential episode, and I'm going to give the Zanti Misfits a 4.5 out of 5. I can definitely see why this is a very memorable and very classic episode of The Outer Limits, and I highly recommend it for fans of the series and just fans of good science fiction shows in general. So 4.5 out of 5 for the Zanti Misfits, and as always, thank you very much for watching.